Hello and welcome to take 2 of P&K Q&A for April the 10th. Hmm. Huh. Try it again, Krow. It says no answer. Hmm. Hmm. I wonder if it's to do with... Hmm. Hmm. There we go. Okay. Let's see how I view broadcast quickly. Okay.
Holy crap.
There we are.
What a mess.
Oi.
So that was the other phone that I was trying to use, but that didn't work out.
Okay.
I don't know what the hell was going on with that thing.
Yeah, I just updated my Facebook app on my iPad here. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, because the last time it I guess it had the split screen for us on the output, but it basically ran down the middle of my face. So I thought, well, I was going to check for an update on the app, so I updated my Facebook app, and now it's showing us the way I think it should. But maybe that's causing the issue with your thing. I don't know.
I don't know. That it's supposed to be a top of the line phone.
Mm.
Oh, I think it's like the S79 or some stupid thing like that.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And this one's like the S10. Personally, I like the S10. So, I don't know. Every phone that I've had since probably since '08 has been a Galaxy S version.
Mm. Okay.
It, yeah. And before that, I was using BlackBerry until BlackBerry they stopped
Okay.
making the BlackBerry that I liked.
Mm.
And then they brought out this other thing, and I was like, that's bullshit. And then I stopped buying BlackBerry.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I was like, you know what? A smartphone, I can do way more. I can watch videos, I
Yeah.
can text, I can do tons more. And then after that, social media. And we're about to get a better social media. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But first, did you want to do the opening prayer, or shall I?
Who did it last time? Did I do it last time? I think I did it last
I
time. Oh, let me
don't
do
know.
the intro. This is I'm Peter,
And this is Krow.
and this is P&K Q&A for April the 10th. Welcome. And yeah, what do you got?
Well, got the Father's Prayer again.
All right, we can do that.
Yeah. Wish I could have had my other little phone. All my notes are in that. For the Father of the people is with the creation by the Father, with the knowledge in the heaven is with the holy name of the Father. For the knowledge of the truth is for the people of the Father. For the kingdom of the Father is in the knowledge of the truth. For the knowledge of the Spirit is for the unity with the Father. For the kingdom of the action is with the knowledge by the truth. For the protection of the earth is for the life of the people. For the knowledge of the Father is with the protection for the people. For the truth of the people is with the path unto the heaven. For the teaching of the people is with the truth of the people. For the knowledge of the day is for the production, working, and learning skills of the people. For the wrongs, sins against the knowledge is with the actions of the people. For the sins, temptations of the flesh of the people is for the wrongs against our neighbor, for the knowledge of the people in the forgiveness of those wrong decisions. For the people of the debts are of the responsibility in the truth. For the people of the awareness are for the forgiving with the truth. For the knowledge of the people's leader is with the teaching with the truth. For the evil of the people is for the lack of knowledge of the truth. For the knowledge of the truth is for the freedom of the people against the evil of the darkness, lack of knowledge. For the people are with this agreement. I like this because it does sort of sum up what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and we sometime I'd like to do an episode just on that and go through it line by line and unpack it, because I sort of understand what it's talking about, but there's so much detail I don't know.
Well, let's do what I did last week. Just pull out a section that jumps out at me and
Okay.
just talk about it for a second. For the sins, temptations of the flesh of the people is for the wrongs against our neighbor. For the knowledge of the people is in the forgiveness of those wrong decisions. Now I look at this, and basically it puts this little section basically in point of law. It puts the responsibility on the individual for their own bullshit. Mm-hmm. Personal or otherwise. And that basically you're responsible for yourself, and you're responsible for any wrongs that you do against other people. You can't, basically, this little section is telling us that your parents, your grandparents, your mother, your uncle, your aunt, the babysitter that raped you, all of that stuff, that is not responsible for your actions. You can't use those as excuses when you stand before the Father and say, yeah, but this happened to me, or that bad thing happened to me. Bad things happen all the time. We're meant to grow to reach above them. And yes, I know horrific things do happen to people, and they may never get past them. And there are certain allowances for these people in creation. But if you end up on the first training planet, and which the first training planet is almost like purgatory. Mm. And you don't go past that planet until you accept reality and you accept truth. And on this planet, they're patient for souls to come to the realization of accepting reality, accepting the situation that they were born in on their nativity planet, and to rise their spirit above it. So this can take anywhere from 20 years up to 2,000 years, depending on the individual. The universe is very patient, but until you can reach that point to where you can accept truth and reality, you will not leave that planet. And there's 7 more planets after that before you reach Jerusalem. And so forgiveness is basically the acknowledgement of truth in the end. When you look at this little section, you begin to realize that forgiveness is not a feeling, it's not an emotion, it's an acceptance of the truth. The truth that you might have done something wrong to somebody, and it's something that you may have to correct. Or if it's something that is beyond your ability to correct, then you're going to have to find a way to work around it. And I don't know. I'll apologize when it's necessary, but in most cases, we're mostly left with the tools at our disposal to work with. And if you don't have the proper tools in your arsenal, then, you know, sometimes you do shitty things and you don't mean to. So, okay, so that's that.
Yeah. And then I was going to, I think you said the Father's Prayer related to what we were trying to do here, and I kind of just slid over it, but I want to apologize for that and go back to actually ask you to talk just a bit about that, if you would.
Well, about educating, not so much educating, but just bringing knowledge to people. Okay. And you know, fire up your imagination. I mean, we talk about some pretty far out stuff, and I don't know, some of it might be true, some of it might be just, you know, I don't know, the beginnings of a sci-fi novel. Who the hell knows? But, you know, I want to see people just use your imagination and understand the responsibility that you have for yourself and the people that you choose to bring into your reality, and understand. And part of me believes that in order to understand reality, you've got to understand where we came from. Because once you begin to understand where we came from, then you can understand what's really going on here. What's the purpose of this life? And, you know, I shock people when I say I know the purpose of life. You ain't gonna like it, but I know what it is based on what the Urantia book has told us about how the universe operates, how it's administrated. Then you come to then you can see what the purpose is, and it's not even a question. And it makes, if the universe is what the Urantia book says, which I believe that it is, and, you know, and sometimes my attitude is pick a story and stick with it. I mean, yeah, I choose the Urantia book, and I choose the story of Jesus. And basically everything else just falls into proper moral principles is what it all comes down to. And how we choose to live and express ourselves. But according to the Urantia book, our existence comes down to one thing, or two things. Developing creating a character, because we're co-creators with God. So if we create a character that complements the gifted personality from God, and our other purpose is to fuse with our thought adjuster. That's the two purposes. Because if everything that I've said here is correct, then this is the farm. This is a planet of time and space, our soul farms. It's a combination of morphogenic spirit and universal spirit coming together to create one being that goes off into the eternal universe. And you start your career in the universe. And this is an incubator for souls, essentially. So that souls have a chance to grow and gain roots. Because without a solid foundational character, then you would not survive the greater universe. You would not survive being in the real, because there's like so much chatter in the real. Because when Adam first came to Earth, Adam and Eve, they were astonished by the silence. Like, so that tells you, and the Urantia book says that they were used to hearing chatter all the time. You know, the circuits were open to them, kind of like us in our 21st century. I mean, there are people, and I know I used to do it. I wouldn't go nowheres without radio or music. It's just all the time, just play, and my ears never stopped vibrating. Even at night, we used to still crank the tunes. I slept like a baby with Mushroom Head screaming in the background. Don't ask me why. Mushroom Head's a band. Go look it up. The first two albums are like awesome. As far as I'm concerned, they kind of went downhill after the third. But yeah, so neighbors hated us. And so yeah, that was the environment that they grew up in. That was the environment that they lived in. Nowadays, I like my silence now. So I don't know. Maybe it's just years catching up. I'm already half a century on this planet, which is a lot further than I expected to get. And if y'all knew my life before, you'd be surprised that I made it this far anyways. I've fallen off of mountains and lived and not broken a bone. How messed up is that? That one everybody's surprised by that. I mean, I drop over a cliff and drop like, 4 or 5 meters to the next landing. And yeah, you guys came down, they collected me up, and I really, really expected my whole right side. Like, I expected broken ribs, I expected cracked femurs, you name it. I totally expected it. And when they put me through the x-ray machine, they were like, nothing broken, but yeah, you're going to be a couple of weeks in physiotherapy, because tomorrow morning, your whole right side's going to be black. And, well, they weren't wrong. So, yeah, weird. And, yeah, there was another time, I was sliding off of a cliff in New Brunswick. Oh, that one was really bad. That one I get PTSD when I think about it. It's so bad. I mean, I was sliding and I'm like grabbing outcrops, I'm grabbing roots, I'm grabbing everything I can think of. Like I'm just like clawing the stone as hard as I can. And then boom, finally a rock that didn't slip out of place and it held my weight. And when I flipped around, my feet were probably about a foot away from this, because when I looked down, yeah, everything was about that tall. And I was just like, holy shit. At that point, I just kind of turned to my right and I was like, I don't see you, but I know you're here and thank you. Because I was like, wow, that one, yeah, that one, when I think of that one and I relive that moment, the adrenaline pumps just the same. So, and yeah. And then another one was, should have fucking died. I went out onto an island, uh, me and a couple of friends, and I think it's Preacher's Island in the Bay of Fundy. Anyways, you can go across the sandbar to get out there when the tide is low. Well, we stayed too long, and the tide was coming in. And we were like, we can make it. And well, we did make it, but I'll tell you, just barely. And the thing you got to know about the Bay of Fundy is, well, in other parts of the world, it takes about 90 minutes for the tide to come in. Not in the Bay of Fundy. 30 minutes. And if you're caught in it, you're done. So when we decided to go across, it was probably already 10 minutes in, and it was going to take us almost 10 minutes to get across the sandbar. Yeah, so we had like, 10 minutes to spare. And when we got to the other side, we just watched the whole, like all the rocks that were on either side of the sandbar just disappear under the water. And yeah, and then Preacher Island really did become an island. So that was a fun experience. If you could have seen how we did it, one of us had to sit, well, one of us, when I say one of us, it was actually me, that had to sit out on the hood while somebody else drove, and I had to tell them which way to go to miss the rocks. And while plowing almost 2 feet of water. And it was starting to, by the time we got to the other side, it was already up on the hood and I was soaking wet. Oh, hanging on to the wipers while we're running across. Yeah. So even then, like one bad turn, I would have been in the water and I wouldn't have had a chance. A buddy of mine did get caught in the Bay of Fundy tide once. He was scuba diving, lost track of time, and he got caught. And basically, with all of his gear on and the fins and everything, he said it was just like you're just treading water. And then after a while, he began to move backwards, heading out to sea. And so he figured that he would do a jag and head for a rock, and he did. And he got to that rock just barely. Actually, he was doing it the whole time that he was going. He missed 3 other rocks that he thought he could get a hold of and ride out the tide. And it was the last one that he was able to get to. And if he missed that one and he knew it, he was done. They would have found him out. They would have found him in Boston Harbor, and he wouldn't have been alive. And yeah, he's a good lesson. And that happens more than you think in the Bay of Fundy. People getting caught in the riptides.
Yeah, we've actually been there in the fall, winter, some kind of. We went to Halifax, and we drove out to the bay. Does the bay span New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, or is it kind of just in Nova? I don't know the geography that well, but we were on the Nova Scotia side, and then so anyway, I've seen it. It's we sat there for 30 minutes and kind of watched. I didn't have a tide app on my phone, so I didn't know like the optimum time to go, but we were kind of traveling from one end of the island, or the one end of Nova Scotia to the other, so we were sort of on a schedule anyway. But I have gotten to see the Bay of Fundy, so it's pretty cool.
It's pretty spectacular, especially on the closer to Moncton. Well, I guess it's the Fundy National Park. And yeah, they took that big chunk because it's like the most spectacular scenery in the Bay of Fundy. I mean, it's got everything. St. Martin's is like really beautiful in the summertime. And there's a big cave that when the tide's out, you can go and explore. Yeah, and the soil is like this red. Not as red as my shirt, but it's like more like red, like your shirt. And so, and you got that going on. And when the sun goes down and it hits those red cliffs, it just creates all these crazy colors on the side of the cliff. So that's always cool to watch. And it usually happens like in June, or like all around the solstice time. And then after that, the sun starts to get dull, and you don't get that bright, the bright colors out of the cliffs anymore.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we were, I think, in the Minas Basin area, kind of the south, the southwest, the south or the southwest end of the bay, where it kind of hooks around into Nova Scotia.
Yeah, that gets more jagged and more into like the Atlantic Ocean, and that's just jellyfish infested waters. Oh yeah, and you like when the tide goes out, the stench from the ones that didn't make it, it's just god awful. Anyways, enough reminiscing about home.
Okay, so we got things happening this week. I've got one to start with, I guess. Don't know how many people have heard. Prince Phillip has passed away at the age of 99.
Yes, just one more dead evil fucker. I know everybody's gonna be like, oh, you can't speak ill of the dead. It's like, why not? It's I like living in reality, and the reality is that this is the same guy that said that when he dies, he hopes to be reincarnated as some kind of deadly disease to reduce the population of the planet. And, I don't know. When I tweeted out, what did I tweet? God, it was hilarious. They'll probably name a deadly virus or disease after him now. It's what he would have wanted. And it's true. And so, yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I don't know what made this guy so evil, because his beginnings should have set him up for noble deeds. But somewheres along the line, he got bitter, probably because he didn't get a kingship title, because apparently that was one of his contentions when he married Queen Elizabeth, that he did not have a title. So she gave him the title of prince so that he would have a title. And it was a little bit into their marriage before he got that. And so, one of the well, I mean, he sort of, I mean, in British society, if you don't have a title, you're nothing. So I kind of understand where he comes from, but I think that he didn't like, he wanted the title of king, but instead he got prince. So that was always something there. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, people got their claws into him. Same thing with Queen Elizabeth. I mean, she started out, I mean, she, first of all, she was far too young to become a queen. I mean, I think she was still in her 20s. I might have been her late 20s.
22, 25, I think.
Yeah,
when she became
so,
queen, something like that.
I mean, that's a hell of an age to take over something like that. I mean, there's no chance. She was still like learning shit. And then no chance to learn from her father because he wasn't supposed to be king. So he wasn't trained for the position. He was trained for a prince's position. And then all of a sudden, the kingship was thrusted upon him, and he was just completely overwhelmed. So because of that, there was no, he didn't take the time out to train his daughter, his oldest daughter, to take over. And so that stopped a tradition of father passing knowledge down to the children. That got interrupted. Now, the guy that was supposed to be king, I forget his name. See how horrible, right? Totally forgotten. And he had all the training, and all the knowledge was passed down to him. But he was exiled to America, or to France, and then from France they came to America. So he couldn't exactly tell his brother or advise his brother, and the way that he advocated the throne would not allow for such a thing anyways. So now you got this guy that hasn't been told shit and now is in charge of everything. And all these people that are under him, they all fucking know it. What do you think they're going to do? I know exactly what they did. They did whatever the fuck they wanted, and there wasn't anything he could do. He was just a powerless king. And by the time Queen Elizabeth came along, she was just as powerless. Basically, they were slaves to their own tradition. They had created such a monstrous system around royalty that what worked in the past had no place in the 20th century. And to her credit, she did do a lot to modernize the monarchy, but at the expense of power. Like, the queen is supposed to be the one to tell Parliament that, whoa, 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 you can't do this because it goes against the Constitution. And she has the power to dissolve Parliament when they did that. But if you look at how Parliament has behaved up through the 90s, just for the last 30 years, it's obvious that she has zero power to do anything, because Parliament has basically ran rickshaw over the Constitution, and they just don't care. And no doubt that their elections are probably just as corrupt as the US elections. No doubt at all. So, and, oh, we're going to circle back to Prince Philip, but I want to tell you this one on elections. I think it was in Brazil. Seen a video where people had stormed this warehouse where ballots were being stored for the upcoming election, and they basically ripped the doors off the place. Like, they were pissed, and I don't know how they found out, but they found this out. And you're watching the video and you're like, well, what the hell's going on? And everybody's speaking Spanish. So yeah, unless you know Spanish, you don't know what's being said. And so one guy turns around and he picks up a big pile of ballots, holds them up to the camera, and then starts showing one at a time, pre-filled ballots for the election. Same guy. And it's like, oh, that's going to be a problem. So people have found this out. So the exposing of the corruption in the US has caused a domino effect around the world on elections. And I have no doubt that the elections in Canada are probably not secure either. And, I mean, has Elections Canada saying that they are? I mean, shit. I mean, they take their talking points from the Prime Minister's office. So, I mean, what's that? And I mean, that's like asking the watchdogs to watchdogs themselves. It never seems to work out well, at least not for the people. And so I have no doubt that our elections are corrupt to the core too. And if that becomes apparent that they are, it'll explain a lot that has gone on in our elections and how certain people keep getting reelected to Parliament. So there's so that might end up coming out. So that domino effect is going around the world. So we have the coup in Myanmar that is ongoing right now, and then they say it's an attempted coup in Jordan, but the comments that have been coming out almost seems like it's been a successful coup, and it's only mainstream media that's saying that it was an attempted coup. So we won't know more on that for a few more days. But there are like certain countries that are backing the Jordan coup, one of them being Saudi Arabia. And we already know that Prince Solomon already did a huge purge in his own country. If y'all missed that a few years ago, it's when he arrested a bunch of millionaires, some of them relatives of his, and basically bottled them up in a five-star motel, which was basically their jail. Well, they went sorted through everything, and a lot of them were arrested. Some of them were quietly executed. And it was all to do with violations in human rights and money laundering and shit like that. So I tend to think that Prince Solomon is probably a righteous guy, a righteous man, and wants to do what's right and seems to be doing what is right. So, I mean, calling him a prince, I don't think he's a prince. I think he's the king now, just not in title. I think his old man is still alive, but he's pretty much the de facto king. The military backs him 100%, so that basically makes him king. And a leader has no power if he doesn't have the backing of his generals. So that goes for like any government. Without the backing of the military, the government essentially is powerless. Right now in Canada, the government is relying on the RCMP to be its muscle, and in turn local police forces where they can, but mostly the RCMP. And the reason why it's the RCMP is because the RCMP do not swear an oath to a constitution or a Bill of Rights or a Charter of Rights. Bet you all didn't know that. They swear allegiance to the Queen, and they have an oath of office, which basically says that they won't publish any information that they gain in any course of their investigation or their work. So they're not allowed to talk about what they do. This is why conversation with RCMP officers are limited. And so it's Queen, it's to their office, and there's another section to it, but none of it has to do with Canada as a country or with the people that live within Canada. I know that is shocking to some people. I mean, at least the Americans, all their police have to swear an oath to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Some of them might not be sincere in their oath, but at least it's something. But the RCMP, it's all to the crown, 100% to the crown, to the Queen and her heirs, and any of their officers, I believe it is. So, which, let's circle back to Prince Phillip. So, what's going to happen when the Queen dies? Because right now, Prince Charles doesn't want it. And, because he just figures he's just like, and if he does take it, he ain't going to have much power. It's just going to be nothing but a title, and he knows that. And so, and what is young William going to do? Make him king? I mean, already the British people do not support the monarchy. The only reason why the monarchy exists right now is because of Queen Elizabeth, because she has kept the throne dignified. And so the British and most of the Commonwealth are like, well, she's dignified. So we give it lip service, essentially. But what's going to happen when she goes? I mean, these are your two candidates. Harry he's out of the question, because, I mean, there's question marks on whether or not he's even Charles's son, for one thing, because he does look a hell of a lot like a certain major in the Royal British Army. So there's that. So that might have been a reason why they dismissed him from the family. Who knows, right? Maybe a DNA test came back and they're spinning it like it was their choice, but in reality, they were probably showing the door. And because why else would they be a little bitchy and still fucking crying about it? I mean, there was an interview with these two asshats a month ago, I think it was. It ate up all of mainstream media, and it was just basically an hour-long bitch fest. And it's like, if you left on your own volition, why are you so bitter? I mean, yeah, if you walked out the door and you said good riddance to bad rubbish, why so bitter? You should be happy. You're away, they don't bug you, you got what you wanted. So I couldn't figure out why they were so bitter in that interview towards the royal family. And the only thing that makes sense is if they were showing the door and not, they didn't walk out the door like they said they did. So I don't know. And and we were talking there last night about the energy being different.
Yeah. Yeah, and I figured out something over this last week. I'd been, well, kind of feeling, I hadn't felt that I hadn't felt that afraid in a very long time since I kind of stopped being a liberal in university, I guess.
Universities
And
do that to people.
it was no, I've got and I was feeling this. I didn't know where it came from, and then yesterday afternoon it hit me. It's not mine, because why what do I really have to be? I have so much understanding in the universe. I have so much experience. I have so much. So it's not my fear, it's theirs. I'm feeling their fear. They are scared spitless. That's what
Yeah,
we're feeling.
yeah, and that fear has been building up all week because where has
Mm-hmm.
Prince Phillip been all week? He's been been in a hospital on a slow drip to death. And don't think for a second that there are not people that were terrified of him dying. Because here's the thing about evil people. When you practice in evil, how do you pass that on to an apprentice? I mean, you have to find someone that is just as evil as you are and clever enough to understand what you've done. Because the thing is about evil is that it always goes against nature. So whenever you're doing something against nature, it means that you have to do twice as much planning, if not 3 times as much planning, because you got to take into account all the variables that you're about to go up against, and nature will fight back. Now, when you're operating from a place of truth and reality, it's easy to pass that on to multiple students. And that's the other point. Evil can only pass its knowledge on to one or a few students for fear that those students would turn against them. But when you are dealing in truth and reality, you can pass knowledge on to multiple dozens of students, because all you're doing is you're passing on truth and you're passing on reality. That's all you're doing. Whereas when you're dealing in evil, you're passing on your plans for your world domination and all the secret contacts of people that are able to do the wet work for you. And so there's a whole network involved that has to be kept secret and tight-knit communication. Whereas when it comes to the truth and reality, it doesn't matter if you teach it from the mountaintops, because what are you doing? You're teaching truth and you're teaching reality. So very easy. So this is how evil runs out their own clock. The Son of Man said they contain the seeds of their own destruction, which is true, because they're denying reality and patching reality together with lies. And sooner or later, the lies get noticed, and then people begin to ask questions. I mean, never mind the angels. The angels don't, they've chosen their side already. I mean, Michael gave everybody 200,000 years to choose their side. So I think that sides have been chosen and everything has been settled, and now all that is left is for the adjudication of evil, which brings to another point. What I felt last night it felt like another altar was broken somewheres. And I'm thinking that altar is directly related to Prince Phillip. And, or all the people that were surrounding him, when he died, he left a vacuum, a power vacuum. And don't think for a second, and this is the other thing evil does to itself. They all, it's like they're all just running after that empty vacuum, running after that power that Prince Phillip no longer wields because he's dead, and now they're scrambling. They want to get control of his network. And
a character in a science fiction comic strip I'm looking at described the succession of the leader on his planet, and after he described it, he said, "It sounds orderly when I say it. In practice, it's like 30 seagulls trying to eat the same potato chip."
that's pretty much what a race for a power vacuum looks like. And this is and yeah, somebody will emerge victorious, but there's going to be a lot of destruction in between time. So this will be the deep state basically cannibalizing itself, and that will be a good thing. And Trump took a different approach on this, which I kind of thought it was brilliant, and it had a better chance of sowing more confusion down through the troops. You see, when you have a power vacuum because somebody died, well, the fight for the top is limited to the people that were surrounding the top. Now, what Trump did, which I thought was brilliant, he didn't take out the leaders. He took out the second in commands, the deputies. And I was like, that is how I would fight a war. Don't take out the leaders. The leaders are nothing. Most times they're charismatic and somewhat more organized than the average person. But most of the time they rely on their charisma. The person that's doing all the work is always the number 2 guy. You take out the number 2 guy, it's like knocking out the struts on a bridge. The structure's going to fall down because the number 2 guy is the one making all the contacts in the field and coordinating everything. You get rid of him, the leader now doesn't know what to do. And what ends up happening in that situation is that now the leader has to find a new number 2. But the number 2 he just lost, but he also just, not only in most cases does a leader lose their number 2, they're also losing a best friend. Mm-hmm. You got to bear that in mind too. A lot of time together, going to get to know each other. And so there's going to be grief mixed in with that, and also mistrust, especially if you can pull off getting rid of the number 2 under questionable circumstances, because then it puts, and now everybody is a suspect. So now the leader that the troops look to for inspiration, because that's basically all a leader does, is inspire the troops, they're going to watch him slowly decline. And then what ends up happening after that is that now the whole group begins to splinter off into its various sections, and then those various sections begin to fight amongst each other, and next thing you know, they're cleaning up their own mess because they've all killed each other. Fine, job done. I mean, it's not as quick as Navy dropping an atomic bomb, but the job still gets done. This was, this was the RCMP used this tactic with the biker gangs in Montreal. They basically just let them kill each other. And the biker gangs knew, as long as they were killing each other, cops didn't care. Body wash up on the shores of St. Lawrence. He's got a fucking biker tattoo, shows which gang he's with. Cops are just like, yeah, okay. They notify the bikers gang, yeah, we found one of your boys. You want to come claim the body? And there'll be a investigation, but it ain't much of one. And yeah, they just let them do it. But then there was a time in Montreal where the biker gangs stepped outside of that unwritten understanding between law enforcement and the biker gangs, and they involved the civilian population. It took less than 2 weeks for the RCMP to round every one of those fuckers up and throw them all in jail. Because it was like, you didn't stay in your sandbox, this is what you get. Within 2 weeks, they were able to smash both biker organizations because they've already been watching them for years. They knew everything that they were doing. It wasn't any surprise to them. They never busted the biker gangs for the cocaine. They waited till the cocaine landed on the street, and then they busted the street level guy. Why did they bust the street level guy? Because it was an easier fight to win. Whereas if you went and you busted the biker gang guy, he's got half a dozen lawyers that are going to show up in court, and they're going to fight this thing tooth and nail. So if they don't have a strong enough case, why bother? Whereas you get the low-level dealer off the street, next, because there'll always be a next. There'll always be another guy that's going to try to make money off of selling drugs. Yeah. It's just the nature of things. There's always going to be a black market no matter what. The only thing is that as long as that black market doesn't permeate to general society, it's generally allowed to exist for whatever reason. And quite frankly, I don't mind it because, there's some things that I want that the government thinks I shouldn't have. And my body, my choice. Right? Isn't that what they tell us now? Or used to tell us?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna give props to one of my friends who he made a comment here. Colin said about the power that the Queen. We were talking about the Queen is supposed to ride herd on Parliament. He said they messed up the NHS and the Queen didn't do anything about that, even though it was a violation against the public health system.
Yeah. So she's powerless. She's got no power. I began to realize this when I started paying a little bit more to British politics. I think back in like 2010, 2011, I very quickly came to the realization that she's got no power. When I started watching some of the laws that they were passing at that time, I was like, why isn't she stopping this? Because right up until that point, you see, I grew up in a family that, liked the royalty, was proud to be subject within the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth. There was pride there for my family. It was pride for my family. And so it was something that we had, that I grew up with. And my family has a history with the British Crown, as many families in Canada do, and in other countries within the Commonwealth. And so there was a point of pride in the family for that, and I grew up around that. So it took a long time for me to see that the royal family was just completely powerless in everything. And yeah, once I realized that, it was like, then why are we paying these people? Why are we sending hundreds of millions of dollars from Canada to the royal family all the time? And then once you get past the delusionment of the royal family and you really start to investigate, you start asking questions like, why did the Queen need 600 First Nations children when she came to visit? I remember them telling us, it's like, oh, you know, these are children. They're going to see the Queen, and they're going to be like, they're going to be, the Queen can see the First Nations people. It's like, why are they taking the children to the Queen? Let that dumb bitch go on to an Indian reservation and see the children there, where they're safe and protected by their family. And on top of that, the dumb bitch would be able to see how these children live, not being brought to her with brand new clothes that the government bought for them and dress them up and make them look pretty so that, it looks like, they're living in awesome conditions. They're not. They're not living in awesome conditions on some of these reservations. Not sure whose fault it is. Probably leadership somewheres along the line. Mostly corrupt leadership, I'm sure. And things that and they do this all the time with leaders, which you would think leaders would get upset because it's disingenuous to them. Leader Mao once took a trip across China because he wanted to see how the people were doing. He was sincere in his wanting to see how the people are doing thing. But what they did was most disingenuous to what he wanted to, what the purpose of his trip was. All along the route that the train that Mao was taking, they had spruced up, made it look better, looked like the people were doing fine. So he does his trip across China, photo ops everywhere, everybody looks well fed, everybody's dressed nice. He goes back to Beijing, and and he pats himself on the back for being such a great leader of such a large nation, when in reality it was his people that hid it from him. It's like, you read history enough, you begin to realize that it's not the leader. Like, everybody's like, oh, Mao killed millions of people, Mao did this, Mao did all these bad things. Mao didn't do shit. It was all the people. It was the boots on the ground people that did all of that. Now, did he give an order? Maybe. Or did somebody come to him with a suggestion and he went along with it? It's hard to say, because you got to understand, leaders rely on their advisors for information. I mean, and it's the past isn't like what it is today, because you're like, any leader now, any senator, any congressperson, any member of parliament, member of the legislative assembly, anybody now can go on their phone and they can Google information and they can read. Very easy. Back in the day, not so easy. Leaders were reliant on people that they sent out and would come back with reports. If they gave them a false report, then they painted a false view of reality. All those millions of people that Mo ordered to kill, there was somebody that told him that they were doing bad things to good people. And Mao, wanting to be a good leader, said, we'll send in the army to deal with that rabble. But really, what the army was doing was they were going in and they were killing innocent aboriginals that just wanted to live peacefully on their land. But they were in the way of something, and they had to be taken out of the way.
I've said Henry Kissinger never ran for president, but then he didn't have to.
But why? What does that mean?
Well, he was an advisor to Nixon, right? If he wanted something done, he could. I mean, It's like who, and then I want to circle back to your the thing about how to take out the crime pyramid or whatever. I had this this idea. You start with the bottom pawns and watch them, and for so much as a parking ticket or doing it, you I mean, you can't legally put them in jail for that, but would they do anything, you can hit them with something. If you can put them in jail for a week, you do that, and then the next time they or the people above them do something bad, you hit the bottom row again. Just throw the book at them and you work your way up the system.
What do you think Trump has been doing for the last 3.5 years?
That's what you're describing, yeah.
Yeah,
you take out, if you want to do it, you do that, and then the most effective, or one of the, it's a multi-pronged approach, but what you described is taking out the middle to upper tiers of the upper management, the number 2, 3, 4 strata, and then that's pulling the legs out from it.
Yeah, because every time you kill or eliminate somebody at the top, all you do is you create a power vacuum. Mm-hmm. And then there's a power grab, and that vacuum is going to get filled very quickly. But you start knocking out the pawns, the people that are doing the wet work on the ground. Now you're talking about people with a certain skill set to do the job. It's like anything else. It's like running a refinery or a manufacturing plant. Do you think Elon Musk knows how his plant works? Like intimately?
Yeah, not really.
Not a chance in hell. What he understands how his factory works. Don't get me wrong. He understands how it works, but he does not understand intimately how it works.
He can't do every job on the floor.
No,
he can probably do some of them pretty well, but he can't do every job in the factory, I don't think.
No, I wouldn't expect him to. But I'll tell you, do you know who knows his factory intimately? The building manager does. Mm-hmm. And the building manager, he doesn't even know the building intimately. Mm-hmm. Intimately enough to know to send his men to go or women to go and repair machinery. They know the factory intimately. They know where every wire is in the wall. They know what every switch does. They know where every panel is, and they know how every piece of machinery works. You start knocking out those people, which is what Trump has done. Think about that. Factory setting. You start knocking out the people that know the factory intimately like that, and then something goes wrong. What do you think's going to happen? Shit's going to start going off the rails because there's nobody there that has the skill set to deal with unexpected circumstances. Well, same thing goes for when you take out the front line on these human trafficking operations or any operation. These people have a certain skill set and they have years of experience. You start taking out that skill set, now you're going to have people that are going to do sloppy work. And sloppy work is going to get caught. Mm-hmm. And, because the people that did the job originally, like I said, years of experience, they know how to avoid law enforcement. If they do run into law enforcement, they know how to deal with it. You get the guy that has no experience, but you took him because, well, you had to. He doesn't know how to deal with law enforcement, doesn't know which law enforcement he can pay off, so he tries to pay all of them off and might end up trying to pay off the wrong guy. And, just you can see how it just all falls apart very, very quickly. And that is what we're seeing happening in the criminal world. Like even with the child trafficking that's happening down on the southern border, the coyotes have gotten very sloppy with their work. It was at one time, they were professionals and they would bring the kids across quickly and quietly, and they would get scooped up and put into the system. Now they've got amateurs doing the job, and what these amateurs are basically doing is they're just dropping the kids over these like 16-foot fences, just dropping them on the other side, and wait for the border guards to come and collect them, if they even know that they're there. I can't even, I mean, I don't even want to even imagine how many children have died from exposure in the desert because of these unprofessional coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation is already worse than it has ever been. And they're not, I mean, it's so bad that the Biden administration doesn't even want reporters down there. And the mainstream media, you know, since they're the lapdog dogs of this administration, they happily comply. And they're just like, okay, we won't go to the border. Well, Ted Cruz went to the border with his camera crew, and the shit that he was able to video just basically walking through the door. He didn't even get to the real stuff. He just walked through the door, and what his cameras recorded was horrific. Absolutely horrific. I mean, like literally kids in cages, literally. Like, it's not figuratively. And, you know, people need to see that footage and know what's going on. The outrage continues. But this is the brilliance of the plan, though. As it's going to take something different for each individual to wake up
Mm-hmm.
to reality. For some people, it'll be the high taxes. It's going to hit their pocketbook and they're going to be like, what the fuck? For other people, it'll be, you know, the child trafficking, and they'll be horrified. For other people, it could be the gun grab. It's the mask, the vaccine. I mean, look at the list of shit that is going on right now. I mean, I remember a time when they used to be clever about this shit. I mean, you remember that? Do you remember when they used to be clever about this? Take their time, slowly, you know, like boiling a frog. You know, you start with the warm water, slowly raise the temperature. They were doing a bang up job, because I remember thinking to myself when Obama was president, it's like, this guy is literally destroying America from within. Everything that he did, every policy that he put in place was designed to destroy America. And I was amazed that nobody's seen it. But at that time, I didn't know what was at stake.
Mm-hmm.
And I laughed at the whole thing. I was like, oh, you dumb cunts. Because I actually thought that people were actually in control. But since the Q posts, I now understand elected officials are not in control. They're bought off by corporations, by I don't know, actors behind the curtain. They're just not in control. And now, even I'm looking at everything, and now I'm horrified. I'm just like, this is crazy. But I guess I'm probably more horrified because it actually made its way to Canada, because at that time it didn't make its way to Canada. And I thought, you know, there's no way Canada's going to go along with this shit. And then Trudeau comes along. And yeah, now it's like, oh my God, this shit's going to come to Canada too. Wait, it's already here. Today. Was it today? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was today. It was here. No, it was yesterday. The Montreal police arrested a shit ton of independent news reporters. And I'll tell you, there are some people that are pissed. in the independent media, and these officers, they have no idea the can of worms that they opened up, because Ezra is involved now. And when Ezra's involved, they're screwed, because he knows, he's got the lawyers that live for this shit. I mean, I've seen the interview with his lawyer. Like, they're basically, they're not taking a huge salary to do these jobs. They're doing it like they're getting paid, which they should, because I mean, we all have rent to pay, right? But they're mainly doing it out of passion. But they want their bills covered, and their bills are being covered. People are donating to Ezra's campaign fund, or not campaign, but legal fund all the time. And so these officers, they have no idea the can of worms that they just opened, because these lawyers, they play a different way in court. It's coming more into the public sphere, and the common person is beginning, it's starting to seep down to just the common Joe or Jane, and it's common law. People are beginning to understand the difference between fiction law and common law. People have started to ask questions about these things. And when these lawyers walk into court, they're using common law. And common law is going to have these officers are going to lose their bond. Now, here's the thing. People don't need to know. Okay? You want to get a bad police officer off the street? Don't get him suspended. Go after his bond. You take a police officer's bond, they can never be a police officer ever. And the way to go after the bond is you don't go after the police department. You go after the insurance company that holds that bond. And you make the insurance company responsible for that officer's behavior. Individual officer, not this whole group of officers. The individual, you go after them one at a time, and you take their bond. You've taken their bond, they can't even get a job as a security guard. Like, they won't even be able to use the till at McDonald's. They'll be able to take your order, please. That's it. So that is what these officers are about. That's the reality that these officers are about to face. And they haven't got two fucking clues what's coming down the pipe for them. And Ezra has promised them that this is not over. And yeah, take their bond. You go to the insurance company. And here's the best thing about insurance companies. They don't like to lose money. And if they see $1 million lawsuit on the horizon, if they hold on to this officer's bond, they're going to drop that bond like a hot potato. And here's the best part. There's only a few insurance companies in the world that will bond law enforcement officers. It's a specialized type of insurance. And you get one of these insurance companies to drop a police officer's bond, no other insurance company is going to pick it up. Or if they do pick it up, they're going to want twice as much money. Now the department has a decision. Do we keep this guy on and pay twice as much for his bond, which is going to eat into our budget, or do we just let him go? Well, what do you think they're going to do?
I'm going to interject my my favorite quote about getting an enemy to destroy himself or herself.
That's how you do it.
Yep. What was the other?
Never
about
interfere. Never
knocking out,
interfere
never
with
interfere
an.
with an enemy in the process of destroying himself. I
Yep,
think
you let them
attributed to
do it.
Napoleon. Is that who
Yes.
said it? Or yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Napoleon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the Art of War, or
No.
maybe Napoleon was quoting the Art of War or some very, who knows. He was, well, Napoleon was inspired by the Art of War. What, you don't think that
Okay.
fucker read that? Of course he did.
I did want to ask you. You're talking about taking out the bottom and middle levels of all these systems. What's going on in the mainstream media? What do you see happening there with their strata, and like you were describing with the cartels and so on? What's happening with the mainstream media?
They're imploding.
Okay.
Like they are literally imploding upon themselves. Like it's almost taking place in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have put themselves into such a position by being partisan that they basically are left reporting on tabloid news
Hmm.
because they can't report on Joe's gaffes because they don't want to. They only report what they have to. And so let's put it this way. Joe's little misstep on the Air Force One steps, that might have got like maybe 3 minutes airtime on CNN. That's it. Meanwhile, shit, it's been reposted like a million times on Twitter, and God only knows how many times it's been shared. And so everybody's already got to see it. So because everybody got to see that gaffe, and they begin to notice that CNN is not playing it. It's like, why not? I mean, you had Donald Trump almost tripping on a ramp, going down a ramp in leather shoes. And they had that fucking thing on a loop for 48 hours, at least. And it's just like, well, Joe's little trip up on the stairs, I mean, that wasn't worthy of a 48-hour loop. But Trump's little almost tripping that they had to blow up into proportion, the glass thing. Oh my God, that got so much. That was practically on a loop. When, because he was like, I mean, I understand. I knew exactly what he was doing because my father used to do the same thing. When he wore a tie and he was like in an important meeting, had to come out and have something to drink, he always held his hand there like that, so that if anything dripped, that he wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. So
Like
it wouldn't
that.
get.
Yep.
Yeah, because he didn't want to go back into his meeting with a little stain on his tie. And I mean, you got a silk tie on, anything gets on it, it's like, it's all everybody's going to just, that's all they're going to look at. And they're not going to hear a fucking word you said. That's because, I mean, it's just going to be in your face. So I understood exactly what Trump was doing, and anybody that wears expensive ties or grew up with a father that wore expensive ties knew exactly what he was doing. He was smart. It's like, yeah, no, that's what you do. But who wears a tie nowadays? I mean, I don't. And I don't actually know too many people that do. Even the sales guys where I work, none of them wear a tie. My boss doesn't wear it. I haven't had a boss that wore a tie probably in over 20 years. That's a long fucking time. And even then, it's probably longer. But I'm certain, 20 years, I have never had a boss that wore a tie. I had a boss that wore a tie once in a while for meetings, but not sitting at his desk every day.
Okay, so what else Yeah. So the thing with we covered the royals and the implosion. And do you have anything else before I go to? I've got one question that arose from the things we were talking about. But if you have anything else to cover first, we can do that.
I can't think of anything.
Okay. So my question, or it's sort of related to, you were saying that Prince Philip became bitter because he didn't have a title or whatever, and I jokingly thought, but I wanted to ask you about this. He was jealous of Diana because she was a Spencer, you know, more royal than the royals. It said in some documentary about, there was, you know, after she died, there was this documentary about Princess Diana. It said she was a Spencer, and her father was so and so, you know, the Duke of I don't know what his title was, but anyway. So I wanted to ask you about Diana. I don't think we've ever discussed her.
Somehow I do think I remember reading something that Prince Philip was not enthusiastic about Diane, which probably translates to downright hatred. You know, because we know how the media likes to soft pedal shit, but also the media makes shit up too. And Diane, that poor girl, she, well, when they see, this is also relates to why Charles doesn't want the kingship either, is because of Diane's death and how there were enough signs of a rituals taking that ritualistic symbolology around her death to lead me to believe that she was a sacrifice. A sacrifice to Isis. And that came about because she wasn't willing to be the queen that they wanted her to be. And which basically was going to be the Red Queen. And so she was actually taking steps to dismantle their system. And she was actually working with JFK Jr. on this. And then we know what happened to the both of them. First her,
I got the feeling,
and then
I got the feeling that about Diana, that she was trying to do the right thing. She was decent, and she paid dearly for it.
That's probably about right. She because her family was like so far disassociated so much from the royal family that they would not have been part of any inner rituals or any inner belief system that these people have. So she was actually brought into it. And at some point, she didn't like what she had seen. And nobody knows what it is that she's seen. But we do know from the public record that she had a soft spot for children. And she really wanted to help. And she wasn't just going to Africa. She was going to neighborhoods in Great Britain and helping the children. So she was not just helping the children with melanoma in their skin. She was helping children that were born British as well. And she was also helping other children throughout the Commonwealth. Now, my spidey senses always go off whenever I've seen celebrities or high-profile individuals spend so much time helping children with melanoma in their skin and not doing a fucking thing for white children. or non-melanoma skinned people. And that always set off alarm bells in my brain, because it's like, I mean, it's great that you're helping the children, but white children need help too. Why aren't you going into like places in Eastern Europe and helping those children? Why are you spending all your time in Africa? I mean, there's children in Eastern Europe that probably could be, in some cases, were more desperate than the children in Africa, because these kids were like freezing outside without proper winter clothing.
Yeah.
So, you know, where's the help for them? Oh, they have no melanoma in their skin, so they don't count. Racism takes all kinds of forms, people. It doesn't just go one way. It goes both ways. You can have melanoma in your skin and be racist against people who don't. It's as simple as that. And yeah, it's always vice versa, but we always seem to focus on one side. And quite truthfully, non-melanoma skinned people are probably the least racist on the planet. Really. I mean, you haven't seen, I mean, you want to see some real racism? Go to like Japan or China. And don't go as a tourist, like go like you live there. But you got to know the language too. And yeah, you'll find out real quick. It's like how, you know, we call people that come from another country and settle here, we call them immigrants. In China, you're a foreigner, and you're a foreigner forever. You're not an immigrant. You're just a foreigner that decided to live in China. And that's exactly how they look at you. Oh yeah, you want to see bigotry? Be fat and go to Japan. Oh, people, and they're so polite about it. They are, you know, it's like, oh, you poor dear, you can't fit in that chair. Oh, that's too bad. You're going to have to work on that. It's yeah. So that's racism. Oh, and bigotry right there. It's yeah. No, there's other there's more going on, and there's yes. Don't look at one side of the equation. Look at both sides of the equation. See it coming from both ways. And because in the end, people are people. I mean, personally, I don't see any, well, I mean, I see color. I mean, I'm not fucking blind, of course. I mean, I see the different shades of color people have. But I don't render a judgment because of it in my head right away. I mean, most of the time when I see someone from a different nationality or a different race, I'm intrigued by their facial features. I mean, because the different lines on their face and, you know, how their eyes, they're just everything about them. I'm interested more than anything because I've never seen it before. And I want to, you know, just be like, wow, it's like, you know, how did that ancestry, you know, make your people, like, you know, where did the different colored skin from, and why do we have different color skin and stuff like that? So I mean, these things usually interest me more than anything, so I don't render no judgment. It's usually after I talk to a person, and then once I talk to a person and I find out that they're an asshole, well, it doesn't matter what skin color you are. Assholes come in all shades. So, you know, so to me, it's like, you know, if you're black and you're an asshole, I don't want anything to do with you. If you're an asshole, I don't want anything to do with you. If you're brown and you're an asshole, I don't want anything to do with you. Doesn't matter. If you're white, same thing. If you're an asshole, I don't want anything to do with you. But if you're a good person, it doesn't matter to me what color you are. The only thing, you know, the only thing that really annoys me is sometimes an accent, especially a thick one. It's like, man, I don't understand a fucking word you're saying, but I'm really going to try. I really am. Usually I just get people to text me when they have a thick accent.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we covered a variety of topics there, didn't we?
Oh, didn't we ever?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. I'll have to keep you posted. It's, what is it, 9 o'clock? Well, 8:57, but yeah, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Well, I'm happy that I felt the plan move forward this week.
Yes.
That made me feel real good. It's like nice movement in the ether. That means that we're moving forward. The timelines are converging very quickly. Shit, I actually jumped in my van today and I didn't even recognize the console for a minute. I was just like, oh, so I figure that we've merged with a timeline where I don't have an MV200 van. So, and it's happened before.
Yeah.
I think there's a version of me that never left New Brunswick. And that timeline has ran its course and it's gone now. So all of these timelines have to run their course because as we come up through history, all the expressions, so there are multiple Earths. There is like parallel universes. And we were at our peak probably about 1,000 years ago, maybe a little less, of parallel worlds. But then as time approaches an epoch, all these timelines begin to merge. The ones that are most like each other are going to begin to merge first. And then the ones that are less like each other are going to begin to try to struggle for supremacy in the timeline and until finally when we get to an epoch event, boom, it comes right down to one Earth and one timeline, and that becomes the key, the keystone Earth. And we are quickly approaching that. So until we come down to that, I'm thinking that this is probably why they're in a hurry, because they see the epoch coming. And so something is going to, so that's when everything comes down to just one Earth, and that timeline is going to be chosen by how we decide to go forward. Are we going to go forward with in the case of the United States, are they going to go forward with a constitutional republic, or are they going to surrender to socialism? And that is, if it's a constitutional republic, that is light and life. If it's socialism, that's darkness and destruction. Because socialism does not work. It does not. Some aspects of socialism will work, but socialism as a whole cannot work. Just like pure capitalism cannot work. Because pure capitalism, it would destroy the planet.
Yeah, it's
essentially.
Yeah,
because
it's dog eat dog. It's pure consumption, production. You know, all that. I believe we talked about this earlier on in our career doing this show. Pure socialism is no better than pure communism. There's socialism. There's a what do I say? I think another timeline converged. Let me start that over again. Pure socialism, pure capitalism. Neither of those are really good. I'm advocating for a system that combines aspects of the two. Something like call it socio-capitalism, maybe 20% socialism, 80% capitalism. I don't know what the percentage is, but bottom line is the social programs are great, but we need the capitalist base to sustain them, and it all has to be done in an intelligent manner on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, yeah, and I agree with you, because I think we, as humans, we have a moral responsibility to take care of our lessers.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes lesser humans and the animals and nature and everything.
Yep.
I mean, those who are fortunate enough to be born intelligent have a responsibility to those that struggle. This is why the system is set up like this, is because this is the type of work that you're going to be doing in the universe. Is that, but you gotta like want to do it, and you have to learn to do it with patience. And you know, so we do have a responsibility, but it needs to be done in a thoughtful way, in a logical way. Like, I mean, putting the mentally challenged into homes and basically just cattling them and allowing them to go out and knock up some other mentally challenged person, that's logically, that's not helpful to society at all. I mean, there should be like a cutoff point. I mean, there should be a point where we're like, you know what, we do not want to perpetuate these genes into the future for obvious reasons. But the problem is with that is that people with dark intentions would, again, they would manipulate something like that. And then they would be like, you know, then they would start using it to judge people. I think I've used this example before where, you know, you put a system like that in place, like, you know, with the right intention, and then somewhere down the line, somebody's going to come along and they're going to use it to for eugenic purposes. And, you know, I tried to do this once, and surprisingly, I found very little information on this subject. I asked the question, when two retarded people make a baby, does that baby come out retarded 100% of the time, or is it, you know, same as everybody else? Roll the dice and see what you get. And surprisingly, very little information at the time that I did that, try to do that research. So from what I remember I did read is that I think I remember a number that like 3 out of 4 or 5 babies will be normal. Mm-hmm. In which case, again, it holds true that you cannot do eugenics on humans.
I think we talked about it the other way around a few episodes ago in the Nazi Germany or somewhere. They tried to breed superhumans. They took, you know, very desirable specimens of humans and observed their offspring, and it didn't all, you know, they didn't always have top-notch kids. It varied. I don't know how much, and I don't know how it compares to the research you looked at on the other end of the spectrum when they reproduce, but I don't know. It would be interesting to compare that. And I'd say it would be nature's way of evening out the it's a buffer kind of. So a shock absorber on the system, kind of a damper on anything going one way or the other too quickly.
Well, the Urantia book tells us that the life carriers, when the thought adjusters indwelt the first andadites, Fonda and Antonda,
Hmm.
or Anton.
And
Um,
on Infanta, yeah.
yeah, when as the moment the thought adjusters were able to indwell in their mind, the life carriers locked our development,
Hmm.
because they weren't allowed to make any more improvements or tweak our DNA anymore from that moment. And
Okay.
it got locked in. And it's like, click, boom, done. And so whatever was done up to that point was locked in and done.
It was locked into a self-contained. What I find interesting, I'm gonna take a sharp left turn and mention lava lamps for a second. You've seen them go, right? You know, they do these patterns, and it's a closed environment. You have little to no influence over what it does, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it's something like that. The minute this particular thing happened, the system went from manual, you know, to be it went from read write to read only or something like that, or it went to an internal process. Um, the the external writing process was locked out.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. The external writing, programming, ability to program, locked out. So that meant that once the thought adjusters took residence in the mind of humans, the only rewriting that was going to be done to our DNA is what was already
Mm-hmm.
put in the program.
Yeah.
And so whatever was already in the program was going to run its course. So
Yeah.
our evolution continued, but there could be no little tweaks along the way that the life carriers could normally do.
No external addition. The external additions were locked out, and the
Yes.
system was made to work with whatever was in it as an automated process going forward,
Yeah, at that
or a
moment.
self-contained it for whatever the end result would be. It was all inputs were ceased, or all
Yeah.
further inputs were ceased.
Yeah, so that basically meant that, so that's why we end up with, like, we still have hair, and in certain on our bodies, and some more than others. So because there was no more tweaking, but the system, the program to slowly evolve out the light fur or hairs that the Andedites had, that would slowly be moved. We would slowly drift away from that, but that was already a natural process that was programmed in to the genome to do that, so that when we, half a million years later, the Andedites 500,000 years later didn't look like the Andedites 500 years earlier, 500,000 years earlier. So they were able to still evolve. So the bone structure was already programmed in the direction that it was supposed to evolve in, and it kept right on going. So the Andedites ended up being more upright, as we find in the fossil record, and so and that would just keep going forward. The material that layers our brain, and which we have a hell of a lot more than animals do, that was already programmed in to keep evolving as well. So all the base programs were put in place, just nothing. And even the life carriers, yeah, they say that there was really little left for them to do at the point that when the thought adjusters came and indwelt Fonda and Anton. And so they admit that there really wasn't a hell of a lot left. So everything was mostly in place except for a few minor things. We did get the more advanced healing mechanism which is nice, which is which what I was showing was that in other species, when they get like a wound or a cut, it doesn't close up, it doesn't stitch up the way that ours does, where the stitching happens and it actually starts pulling the skin together on its own to stitch up. What they usually end up having is more like a pus bubble, but inside that pus bubble is all the healing agents. We don't, that was going to be something that the life carriers were going to add, but they didn't get to that. But instead, we do have the superior mechanism of blood clotting and stitching. It would have been nice to have the extra mechanism of the body producing its own healing enzymes to speed up that process. So that's one thing that we didn't get. And also, we were going to get better hearing. Like, our hearing range was going to increase so that we could hear more notes on the musical scale. So we're limited in on the type of music that we can listen to, because our ears are not designed to vibrate at a certain frequency. So we tap out at a certain frequency where we can't hear it. Well, I think we've all done the ear test. When they put in the high pitch one, at some point it just completely goes outside of our range, but it's still there because you can actually feel it, but you just can't hear it anymore because you can feel the vibration in your cells, but your ears aren't picking up shit. Holy shit. So this would be what? Cigarette number 5?
Maybe. Not sure.
I don't know. I think people are going to start ticking off. How many cigarettes is that now? I like smoking. And I use these tips, so I actually get away without filling my lungs full of tar. So that's how I get around it. David Ross filter tips. If you smoke and you want to. They're the ones to get. The other filter tips suck. Only a smoker would understand. Peter's just shaking his head. Oh, what was else I was going to... Yeah, okay. I know what went through my mind. There's a curiosity, and I wonder how advanced the Andadites were 500,000 years ago when the colored races showed up, finally. And we're told in the Urantia book that the family that the colored races were born from, one family, which the Urantia book says is unusual. Normally it happens across multiple families, but in this case, this family had a last name, because the Urantia book called them the Sagnak family. And I'm like, that means that they had a last name. How complex of a society would you have to incorporate last names? Because the only reason for incorporating last names in a society is if you're traveling and you're meeting other people in other places with similar names, and you have to differentiate the family. Because think about how they did it in Europe. It was always Tom from this town back in the medieval times. So you could be Tom of Luxembourg. And then later on, your family becomes the Luxembourgs. So, but we know that the progression of society is what pushed last names, because last names were not a thing even in Jesus's time. 2,000 years ago, last names were not a thing. It was unusual to have a last name. Because when they talk about the Marks, it was unusual that the Marks had a last name. But there must have been enough people around that in that family that they had to differentiate themselves from the other parts of the community, of their family. So,
Yeah, at least they would have said that they were, so and so of such and such tribe. There's a in part of the books I'm writing. There's this part of the race. The culture itself is incredibly advanced. They developed the metric system 14,000 years ago, and they have warp drive and transwarp drive and stuff. But there's and they have last names and even middle names. But one of the characters, and I think I told you about her, she's this admiral, like their chief of naval operations or something. Her family, is like I don't want to call them minimalists, not Luddites exactly, but they went to live in this primitive prairie environment, and I think the only tech they have is teaching tools and an emergency. If there's a medical emergency, they can signal for help, stuff like that. Otherwise, they use they wear a knife harness with a tool belt and kill a deer for food.
Off-gridders.
Yeah,
off-gridders. Yeah, you say
and
off-grid.
Her family name, they when they did this, I don't know, 500 years before she was born, they the last name that she has, they took that for either the founding family that started this group or the area it was from or something like that. It's not like it's not like it's from that region. It's because that's where they live, their last name, rather than a descriptive like
Oh yeah, because my mom,
like
she traced her family's last name, and she was able to trace it back like to the 6th century, and then after that, the name doesn't exist. She could trace the Rideout name back about 1100 years ago, and then it became non-existent. And the trail ran cold in northern Spain. So that's, as far as we know, that's where our family name began, is in northern Spain, migrated to France, and then on to Great Britain. And then from Great Britain on to North America. And we were kicked out just like all the other riff draft. It wasn't rich people that were coming over to the colonies. It was mostly people that they just didn't want. It's like back in those days, the judges just handed out death sentences like cotton candy. And and with that death sentence, you always got the choice. You either can stay here and meet the hangman's rope, or you can get on a boat and head to the Americas. And a lot of people took the boat option and probably regretted it less than 2 weeks in because a lot of people didn't make it across.
Yeah.
But they got here, and this is why the cooperations with the First Nations, with the first settlers, was so high. The cooperation with the First Nations went downhill once the monarchs decided that they wanted to stake their claims, and so they just wanted to get rid of all the First Nations because they were occupying the land. and they wanted to get rid of them any way that they could. And the disinformation campaign that they put on, and there's a good lesson for people today too. It was very simple. They dehumanized the First Nations people. They said they were savages. They said they lived like animals. They're not even human. Don't feel bad about killing them. Hell, we'll help you out. We'll incentivize it. We'll give you a couple of pounds for every scalp that you can bring us. It wasn't the First Nations that started the scalping. The First Nations did the scalping in response to what the Europeans did to them.
Mm-hmm.
That
yes, I've heard that.
Yeah, it was basically our version of the middle finger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you hear, okay, the middle finger, the legend goes that the middle finger was because the French had promised that if they won the war, that they will cut off the middle finger of every long bowman in the British Army or the English Army. And at that time, the French lost, and the English bowmen were like, we still got our middle finger. We still got our middle finger.
Yeah.
And now it's a fuck you gesture, which it is, always was. Well, that is exactly what scalping was to the First Nations. They were pretty rough on each other if they crossed territory, but they weren't like savages about it. They tell the story like, you know, that they tortured each other and shit like that. It all depended on the situation. Just like it all depends on the situation today between countries. It's, you know, there might be, if a message was usually sent to another tribe in the form of the death of a hunter. They weren't warriors; they were hunters, by the way. The more disinformation campaign, they called them warriors. The English did, so that the military personnel would feel like they're actually fighting soldiers. When really what they were hunting, they were killing, were basically hunters and bushmen. I mean, they were not warriors. You know, they were busy feeding their tribe. I mean, you became a brave because you braved the wilderness to go out there and bring food back for your people. That's why you were a brave, not because you weren't a warrior. Wars were not really a thing in North America, but the tribes didn't trust each other either, and they guarded their land zealously. So, which basically meant that if a single person strayed into another tribe's territory and they're found out, they usually just got turned around. It's like, hey, you went too far, you need to turn around. Now, if that brave had killed an animal on that other tribe's territory, now there's a problem. Because you killed an animal on somebody else's property, essentially, and that's food for their tribe, not your tribe. Now shit got taken a little seriously. Now that brave probably will end up being tortured and killed and sent back to his people as a warning. Listen, you fuck up and cross our land, fine. You take the extra step and kill something on our land, we're going to kill you. Because, you know, that's just how it is. And that wasn't much different than what was going on in Europe 500 or, you know, almost 1,000 years before. It was about the same thing going on. And it was tribalism. And Europeans outgrew tribalism. But the First Nations hadn't outgrown the tribalism yet. They would have probably outgrown it sooner rather than later if they didn't have a problem with giants. That's the other thing people, yeah, it's right there in front of you. Go back to the 18th or the 19th century when they actually published this shit, and they were open about it before the Smithsonian took over and started hiding everything. There was a huge, giant problem in the Americas, and if you listen to the First Nation story, there's tons of stories going on that talk about giants, but the European archaeologists, they just wrote it off as fanciful tales. But it's like, wait a second, I think these people know their own history. You know, and they're not telling stories. And what brought this up was a recent discovery on First Nation land down in the States. What they discovered was a cave with giant bones in them. And when these bones, when these remains were examined, they found that these remains had died of asphyxiation. And not that long ago, I think like 600 years, maybe 7. Anyways, it wasn't 1,000. And and now, so they died of asphyxiation, and plus a lot of them did have arrow wounds. Now here's the kick in the nuts for the story, to the point of bringing this up. The First Nations told a story for their history of a time when their ancestors had cornered the giants in a cave, lit a fire at the mouth of the cave, and sent smoke to choke out the giants. And if the giants tried to escape, they peppered them with arrows. And this was something that their ancestors had came together in cooperation to destroy these beasts that were basically cannibalizing them. So there was no chance for the First Nations in that kind of an environment to get a foothold and start technologically advancing. Because when you are in survival mode all the time, you're not thinking about building an automobile. People who think about building things have time on their hand. And also, it's the same reason why they didn't build a more complex religion, is because, again, they were starting, after the giants were gone, they were basically starting from scratch. I mean, shit that should have been taken care of 200,000 years ago, they were catching up 1,000 years ago. And then that catch-up time got interrupted when Europeans landed on their shores. Give it another like 300 or 400 years, the First Nations would have been organized to a point to where when the Europeans set foot in the Americans, they wouldn't have stood a chance, because they would have been met with organized leadership and some kind of defense force, probably in the form of a militia. And it would have been like, yeah, now I guess you're like making deals with us, because that is what the conquistadors, they ran into in South America. You see, it was different in South America. South America, the Aboriginals there, they were organized. They were fucking organized. They had organized leadership. They had organized armies. Like when they landed there, once they got past the primitive tribes, it was like, oh shit, these people have an army and they know how to fight, because they were constantly fighting against each other, because it's summer year round down there. What else are you gonna do? Bored, right? So but the Spanish did come at a bit of a perfect time, because they came at a time when this one king was, well, their title wasn't king. I think their title was Maya. So this one Maya, he was like busy conquering all these kingdoms around him, and his army was stretched thin when the Spanish showed up. But there was still enough of an army that the Spanish still wouldn't have stood a chance. So what did the Spanish do? They negotiated with these leaders, and they made trade deals and all kinds of stuff. But after a while, when they discovered that they had the upper hand on technology when they started bringing stuff across, and also they found that the less informed parts of the country were easily intimidated by their horses, and they practically worshiped these white men on horses, they took full advantage of that. So from coming in on the East Coast, it really didn't take much for the Spanish to just come right across there like wildfire. But they were fighting armies, but they also had armor, which the Aboriginals did not. And the bullets were helpful. But the Aboriginals, they fought. It took basically one guy to really get into the inner parts, and I forget his name, but he was able to do it because he basically fought on their level. He was essentially a pirate, and he fought at the Mayans, at the Aboriginals level, which was basically guerrilla warfare. It wasn't, because at that time, you stand on a line, you shoot at each other. So he made it all the way across South America until he got into the Peru area on the western coast. That's where the brakes got put on, because that's where they began to meet organized resistance. And that's when they really had to sit down. But once the diseases started, then all of those deals pretty much went out the window, and then that's when the burning of the books began. And it all happened in a very, very short period of time, in like a 20-year period. The last holdout for the Maya was Machu Picchu. They held out there for a long, long time, and nobody found that place, I don't think, until the early 20th century.
In 1911, I want to say.
Mm.
Or maybe that was when what's-his-name found Tut's tomb. I don't know. Those were early 20th century is Tut's tomb and Machu Picchu. Yeah.
Yeah. They had, and by that time, it was a ghost town. Mm-hmm. But the Maya had left behind a lot of surprises for the Spanish, because they knew someday they would come. Even though they knew that they were dead, they would die on this mountain. They knew the Spanish would come someday. So you know what they did? Okay, this is interesting. Machu Picchu was basically a secret experimental research station to the Maya. They did like tons of secret experiments here with nature. Ayahuasca, snake venom, spider venom. So they were doing all kinds of crazy shit with this. And so when they abandoned Machu Picchu completely, they let go all these poisonous snakes and these poisonous spiders that they had collected from all over their realm. And they were all here in Machu Picchu. And they let them all out of their cages, and they bailed out of the city. These creatures ran wild for a couple of centuries. And they bred and they spread. By the time the Spanish showed up, there were so many poisonous snakes, so many poisonous spiders. Even the mosquitoes were poisonous. Like, so many people died on that mountain trying to explore it. Every time they moved a leaf, a snake would jump out at you. It was just craziness. And yeah, it took years to get rid of all those poisonous animals. And yeah, just on top of that mountain. They were not indigenous to that area. They just survived. And yeah, that was yeah, so there was organization here in North America for people. These were not primitive people. And I did ask to see what how they lived back then. And I'll tell you, from what I seen, like, their architecture was amazing, what they were able to do with what they had on hand. And the like they didn't like they had a summer home, but what I was showing is I was showing a winter home. Now the summer homes are the teepees. The winter home is way more complex. Way more. It's basically, it's a long structure, and they used the prairie grass to build this structure, and buffalo skins, layers and layers and layers and layers of buffalo skin. This place was sealed up, but they would build like teepee-like structures periodically throughout this larger structure, and these teepee-like structures is what held up the roof against the snow. So basically it was like having like dozens and dozens of teepees all under one roof, but the teepees are holding up the roof. And these teepees served a couple of purposes. They served to hold up the roof structure so that everybody could be inside, but they also provided places for fire because they were perfect chimneys. And
yep.
And that they did is they wrapped the buffalo skin about halfway up so that the smoke, but it allowed the heat to move out to the rest of the building, but the smoke would go up, and it would be a small hole so that it would actually, so that things would move slowly. They had fire down to a science, by the way. And they didn't burn wood.
Doesn't take long if you work with it every day.
But they were not burning wood. They were burning very little wood. What they were burning were tightly wrapped bundles of grass and corn stalk, and with dry buffalo shit. And so all of this was like all wrapped together, and then it would be like so tight it was like throwing, it's like they looked like those fire logs that you can buy, those fake fire logs. That's what they looked like. And they made these, like, they had these things fucking piled to the roof. They were not going to run out. And so yeah, they had all of this just, and so basically winter for them was hunker down. They went out and got buffalo because the snow would slow the buffalo down, but they walked on top of the snow with their snowshoes. Winter was an awesome time to hunt buffalo, and they would hunt them by the dozens, and smoke the meat and put it in stores. And because in the summertime, when they want to hunt buffalo, what they did is they would get the buffalo stampeding in a certain direction, and you know where that direction was heading. It was heading over a canyon wall. And well, I mean, you live here in Saskatchewan. I mean, look at, just anywhere where you go down into a valley, you can imagine a buffalo being chased off the top of one of those ridges. If it doesn't kill it, it's going to break its legs.
Yeah, I went to
So,
one of those places in Alberta. They've got the buffalo jump. They set up an interpretive center and everything there.
mm, you imagine hunting like that?
Mm.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if they had gotten to the point to where they started building roads.
Mm.
I mean, they already had the concept of trails, making trails and marking trails. It wouldn't have took much more of a leap for them to figure out roads. Maya did it, and they did it without iron, too, by the way. They made roads without iron.
Mm-hmm.
They just harvested the rock and they placed it in place. I got pictures, like when I was in Peru, like that's essentially what every walkway is. Like you got to have strong ankles when you're
Mm-hmm.
walking on some of these streets in South America because the rocks, even though they're packed in the mud and it's hard and the rocks don't move, but it's just so uneven because you'll have a spot sticking out here, spot sticking out there, and it's very different to walk on. Let's put it that way. But I did notice that there were like some of the older ladies who have walked those streets a million times. They seem to know
Mm-hmm.
how to walk a path that was the most level.
Mm-hmm.
Because I sat on a bench and I watched this lady and she just kind of weaved through everything. And I was just like, why is she doing that? Then I noticed the spots that she wasn't walking. I was like, holy fuck. I was like, that's clever. She's got a path all figured out. So that she doesn't trip over just, sometimes it's only a quarter-inch knob sticking up out of the sidewalk. But it's enough to fuck you up if you're not paying attention. See, this is also goes to show it's like this is why people from those areas seem to be more attentive to their surroundings because I think they don't have any choice. I walking on these streets, I thought to myself, you trip once on here, I mean, you're going to cut open your hands because there's just sharp edges everywhere. I mean, yeah, well, I guess they're not sharp edges, they're rounded edges, but some of them had corners. And yeah, it's like you trip on this, you're going to do some damage. And I'll tell you, if you were a kid growing up there, you'd probably only have to do it once. So did anything else come in for questions?
I think I've covered it all for now.
Mm-mm.
I'm talking about the timelines converging. That I want to talk about that in the next episode because
That
I've got a bunch of because it's like how much of reality is defined. It's like yeah, so many rabbit holes we could go down with that one.
oh, so many. Well, I mean, that's what I seen. That's what I seen Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
Is I seen like the whole multiverse laid out in front of me, and then everything converging down into one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like So I think that's what evil understands this, and that's how they know they're running out of time because it's coming down to one Earth. They want it to be theirs, and we want it to be light and life.
Yeah.
And that's the battle that we're fighting. And thank fuck that there's a plan,
Mm-hmm.
because if there wasn't a plan, we would be screwed. And yeah. Oh, I was watching a remote viewer, and he was talking about what was taking place. They called it during Atlantis, but we understand it as being that time between 200,000 years ago and about 150,000 years ago. And they said what they seen was what I said, that the fallen had came here and they were benevolent. And they taught mankind all kinds of stuff, many, many things. But they're careful not to give mankind too much. And this went on for a while, but they started getting frustrated with mankind because mankind was greedy. Mankind always wanted more given. It's like, why can't we have that technology? And apparently, and these, I guess these were giant beings, but they were benevolent. And they were careful at first because they had a bit of a taste for human flesh, and or at least their offspring did. Just like Adam and Eve's offspring had a taste for animal flesh, except the fallen's offspring had a taste for human flesh. And so as time went on and mankind was not learning and constantly demanding and them not giving to mankind, the remote viewer said that it was mankind that launched the first stone because they felt cheated out of technology and they wanted it. Kind of makes sense, actually. And so that is what started the war. And apparently there was many of the fallen that didn't want to war with mankind, which makes sense because remember the lie that Lucifer told them. Lucifer told them that, oh no, we're going to ascend these humans. We just don't need Michael to do it. So a lot of these fallen that came to Earth, they believed that they were going to ascend the humans, but they wanted to do it faster than Michael's plan. But Michael's plan works for a reason because we talked about the foundations being necessary within the morphogenic field in order for things to stick. Like we would have gotten over greed a long time ago if we had followed Michael's divine plan. We would have went through that phase just like children go through a phase as they grow up. We would have went through that phase and we would have learned from it. It would have been in the morphogenic field so that there would have been no need to reteach it every generation. It would have been innate within us that greed is not a helpful thing. And, you know, it just would be something that we wouldn't bother with. It's just like, you know, it's like how it's like in the 21st century, we don't bother eating each other. Okay? Our ancestors were in the habit of eating other humans. They were from another tribe, so what? They make for good eating. And so, I mean, we don't do that anymore. And it's not a question of controlling ourselves to not do it. It's who the fuck's going to do shit like that? Right? Well, that's where we would have been with greed. It would have been like something that was there, but then we would have looked at it and just like, yeah, but why? What's the point? We would have understood that this life isn't forever. We're preparing ourselves for the next iteration. That this is just the starter pot in a greenhouse is all this is. That's what this is. And so we would have understood that and we wouldn't have the problems that we have today. But without that foundation, what the fallen found is that they were constantly reteaching the human race until finally war broke out. Some of them escaped to underground while others stayed and they're like, no, this is our planet. And they're like, fuck it, these greedy humans, they got to go. Or at least we need to get their numbers under control. That's where the first thought of population control came in. I figured, okay, if we can get the population of these humans down, we'll be able to control them. And once we can get control of them, then we'll be able to teach them and ascend them properly. That was always that's how they lied to themselves. And then once they started lying to themselves like that, then one lie after another, until finally there were no more of the original fallen that believed all this, and what was left over just became hateful towards humans because their children had a taste for it. So they're like, hey, Dad, come on, it tastes like bacon. And yeah, firemen have said that about burning bodies, by the way. So a little bit frightening when you think about it. Oh, and by the way, we can actually harvest spare parts from pigs, and they work in humans.
Mm-hmm.
Let that fucking roll around in your brain for a minute and see if you come out sane on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just, and we know, science knows. And the pig, not a wild hog, we're talking farm pig, is a genetically modified animal. We know this. And the fact that they can breed is still a mystery to veterinary science, because technically, if it's a genetically engineered animal, it should not be able to breed, but it does. But yet it's genetically engineered. A mule is a genetically engineered animal. Is it mule or donkey? I think it's mule. Mule.
A mule is a cross between a donkey and a horse. Usually they're sterile.
Exactly, because that's genetic manipulation. And that is generally the result when, like, when rabbits crossbreed with cats, and I've seen it happen, the offspring is always sterile. And scientific papers have been written on this, that when you do crossbreed species, when you can do it, the offspring is always sterile.
Yeah.
You can't create a line of mules. You want a mule, you got to put the effort in. You got to put a horse and a donkey in the same pen and cross your fingers. And so that's and yeah, you end up with a mule. You run that mule for its lifetime. And why do they breed mules? Because it's just a tougher animal.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they're more durable. I mean, why else would they? Otherwise, what would be the point if it isn't reproducing?
Exactly. Yeah, it must be just a tougher animal. Must be able to go longer without water or food and shit like that. And it's like, yeah, it's like buying an old Datsun and running it into the ground. So yeah, they just So after that, the giants became things of nightmare, because the giants were eating people, and also because they were basically using people as cattle. Then evolution, basically our societal evolution, basically stalled, because again, survival mode. I mean, you're hiding out in the woods. You're careful not to make too big of a fire, and you're teaching your children, always be scared of the giants. Got to watch for the giants. They get you, they'll eat you. I mean, shit, we have stories to this day and storybooks about giants eating children. I mean, where the hell did that come from? And again, we've got the fossil evidence. It's just the Smithsonian is hiding it. Just like we have the fossil evidence of Adamites, but nobody wants to talk about it. You know how many elongated skulls they found along the Black Sea? It's like they've lost count. I think at last count it was like 2,500. These are all Adamites. And down in, they're only starting to talk about it in South America. Russians hid it for years. They wouldn't let nobody talk about it. The Russians even went so far as to collect a mummy with an elongated skull that was found in Egypt in the early 20th century, like I think during like World War, near the end of World War I, I'm pretty sure. And they went in and they grabbed that thing and they got it out of there for whatever reason. And yeah, they don't talk about it. It just went. And let's see, other things that have happened in Egypt. One interesting thing is the Osiris shaft. It's like you visit this thing, or I've watched videos of it, and I've seen the drawings of it. This thing is built like a prison. And at the very bottom is like this ritualistic chamber that was full of water that they pumped out, and then a sealed coffin. Well, they opened the coffin or the sarcophagus, and they say they didn't find anything inside. But it's like, what did you fuckers let out? It's like, Mummy movie much? And then there's like other shafts leading away from this bottom shaft. And the best part about all of that is that there's a video which has that head of and that used to be the head of antiquities, that fat fucker, that
Zahi Hawass.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
guy. And he's like pointing to these shafts behind him, and it's like, well, we haven't explored them yet, but they go nowheres. And I'm just like, well, that's makes no sense.
Yeah.
And then skip ahead 15 years from then, or 20 years from then, this Osiris shaft is reopened. You can visit it. A guy went in recently, Bright Insight, Jimmy from Bright Insight. He took a bunch of video footage, and it's like, why are there steel bar doors on those shafts that go nowheres? Makes no fucking sense.
Yeah. Is it the Osiris shaft? Because I watched a video of a tour that goes to and they climb down these iron ladders that were, I don't know, there's 4 or 5 levels, and they're like 20 or 50 feet between. It's like 50-foot ladder down to each one. You got to be in shape to get it. And they had they said there's these various they look like 2-meter cubes or something with no lids, and they said there's residual organic goop on them or something, and they wanted to analyze them. Is this the same shaft you're talking about? I mean, there's probably, these things are all over Egypt.
No, that's, I know which shaft you're talking about. It's a different one. I think it's the replica shaft, the replica of the Great Pyramid. A lot of people don't know this, but there is a replica of the underground chambers.
The trial passage, yeah, it's a compact 45-degree. No, this is, you climb straight down a ladder.
Straight down ladder?
Straight down ladder.
Sounds like the
2 or 3 times. Yeah.
It sounds like the Osiris shaft, but I do know which team you're talking about, because they did take a sample, and then Egypt put a warrant out for their arrest, but they were able to get back to Germany. And before they were arrested, like, they bailed out of Egypt with their sample, and then the Egyptian authorities lost their fucking mind. And it's just like, you need to chill. It's like, you should have fucking, the Egyptian, the Ministry of Antiquities should have took a sample years ago and studied it if they were at all interested in answers. And this is the other thing. It's so stupid that I just don't understand. And it's the same thing with what's going on right now with like vaccines and shit. And one senator actually said it. It's like, well, if you would give people the incentive of not having to wear the mask and social distance, more people would get the vaccine. And they're like, nope, nope, we're not doing that. I'm just like, no, why not? I mean, Christ knows you'd do anything else, but why not that? I mean, really, eh? I mean, all of a sudden you got a moral compass, and how does that trigger your moral compass? And so there's something else going on there. Well, shit. You could say, you could say the same thing about all these countries that have these ancient ruins everywhere. It's like they bury shit, but what they haven't learned is that the countries that don't bury shit and they just like leave it wide open, hey, come make up your own fucking mind because we don't know either. Tourists. That tourist money just rolls in. I mean, Peru does a lot of that. There's only a few sites in Peru that the ministry will protect. Machu Picchu, for obvious reasons. Sacsayhuamani, for obvious reasons. If you've been there, it's like, yeah, why do you want people just fucking walking everywhere? But then there's other sites in Peru. Wide open. Walk wherever the fuck you want. Explore whatever you want. Do whatever you want. But these are sites that you can't damage anyways, even if you wanted to. You'd need a bulldozer. But then there's other sites that are delicate and they make sure that they're taken care of. And others, well, and then of course, other sites are just so popular that you got to control traffic. Like Machu Picchu, holy crap. We went there, our guide was smart. We went at like 5 in the morning, and we're like, that seems ridiculous, but we showed up. Gate opens at 6. Boom, we walk in. First people through the gate. Excellent. We were there till noon hour. By the time noon hour started, it was crowded. Like it was really crowded. Like you were walking on the edge of cliffs, and it was getting a little disconcerting. And it's a long fucking ways down from the top of that mountain, by the way. A long fucking ways down. And buses all the time up and down that mountain. And those bus drivers, I'll tell you, yeah. But anyways, so yeah, if you ever decide to go take a trip and do a tour with these places, early morning's always best. I found the same thing in Mexico. When there early in the morning, it was nice. You could walk around, see everything. But then there was other sites that I landed there in the middle of early afternoon. It was just people everywhere. And then,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what do we got? It's 10:05.
Yeah, I think.
We better shut her down. Anyway, thanks for hanging out, and as always, final decision as to what's so is yours, or you're what? We're listening to a conversation. We're trying to figure out what we think is so, and yeah,
we're
it's
just
open
trying
to
to figure
interpretation.
Put ideas, help people, give you ideas, make you think,
Yes.
Want you to think.
Absolutely.
I mean, God gave you a brain. You're expected to use it.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. This has been Peter.
And this has been Krow.
And this is P&K Q&A. Peace out.
Peace out.